Imagine being thrown out of the only place you called home, with no hope left and no one to turn to. That was Naomi's harsh reality, until one fateful day she met a billionaire who changed everything. But this isn't just a story of rescue. It's a tale of deep betrayal, shocking secrets that unravel lives, and a love that no one saw coming. How did Naomi go from a poor, overlooked maid to something much greater? What hidden motives drove the jealousy around her? Find out now. In a small town where news spread like wildfire through whispered chats and market gossip, there lived a young woman named Naomi. She was an orphan, quiet but incredibly hardworking, scraping by on sheer determination. Naomi had only one thing anchoring her in the world: a job at a small laundry shop where she washed, ironed, and folded clothes for people who barely noticed her quiet presence. The shop wasn't just her workplace, it was her entire home. A thin mat squeezed into a dusty corner served as her bed every night, and a single chipped cup and plate were all she owned in the world. Yet Naomi stayed grateful, whispering to herself in the quiet moments, "At least I have somewhere to stay." But how long could that fragile peace last? Little did she know one spill would shatter it all. One bright morning, Naomi sat cross-legged on her mat, eating her small bowl of gari soaked in plain water, her simple breakfast. Her boss had just unlocked the shop door, letting in the warm sunlight, when the first customer of the day arrived. A well-dressed woman in a vibrant yellow lace gown that shimmered like gold. Naomi quickly wiped her hands on her faded dress and grabbed a cup of water to splash on her face, freshening up before diving into work. As she hurried through the narrow doorway, she didn't notice the woman stepping in at the exact same moment. They collided hard, water splashing everywhere. "Hey, are you blind?" the woman shouted, staring down at her dress now drenched and clinging uncomfortably. Naomi's heart sank like a stone in her chest. "Ah, sorry ma. I didn't see you. Please ma, let me clean it." She reached out instinctively to touch the wet fabric and help. "Don't touch me," the woman snapped, stepping back sharply. "Do you know how expensive this dress is? You, this dirty girl." Naomi lowered her head in shame, her cheeks burning. "I'm very sorry ma. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" the woman barked, her voice sharp and cutting through the morning air like a whip. "Is that how you people work here? No manners, no training?" Before Naomi could say another word or apologize again, the woman stormed past her, heels clicking angrily, and burst into the small office where Naomi's boss sat behind a cluttered desk. Naomi stood frozen in place, her hands trembling like leaves in the wind. She could hear the woman's furious voice echoing from inside, "Fire her. If this is the kind of person you employ, I'm taking my business elsewhere. I can't deal with such carelessness." Naomi's boss, a bald man with tired, weary eyes from long hours, tried to calm her down gently. "Madam, please, it's not that serious. She's a good worker." "I don't care," the woman yelled, her tone unyielding. "If you don't sack her right now, I'm done with your shop, and don't forget, my fiancé is one of your biggest customers." The boss sighed heavily, rubbing his temples, the weight of lost business pressing on him. He walked out of the office slowly and called Naomi over. She stepped forward, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of her chest. "Naomi," he said softly, avoiding her wide, pleading eyes, "I don't know how to say this." "Please, sir, I didn't mean to," Naomi started, her voice cracking. He cut her off gently but firmly. "You've been a good worker, but I can't afford to lose a customer like her. I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave." Naomi dropped to her knees right there on the dirty floor, desperation flooding her. "Ah, sir, please don't do this. I have nowhere to go. This is where I live, where I eat. Please, sir, don't send me away." Her boss looked at her with real pity in his eyes, but he shook his head sadly. "Naomi, I'm sorry. My hands are tied." The well-dressed woman stood at the doorway now, smirking with satisfaction. "That will teach you to watch where you're going," she said coldly before turning and leaving with a loud huff of her gown. Naomi sat on the floor, tears streaming down her face like a river, her world crumbling around her in seconds. Where would she go? How would she survive? The day was just beginning, but for Naomi, it already felt like the bitter end. But was this rock bottom, or the start of something unimaginable? Naomi sat on the floor of the laundry shop, her head buried in her hands, the tears refusing to stop as sobs shook her shoulders. She looked up at her boss one last time, her eyes red and swollen. "Sir, please? I don't have anywhere to go. I will work harder, I will wake up earlier. Please don't send me away," Naomi begged, her voice trembling with raw fear. Her boss sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead in exhaustion. "Naomi, it's not about your hard work. You know I appreciate you. But that woman is my best customer. If I lose her, it will ruin my business. I'm sorry you have to leave. But where will I go? Naomi cried, her voice breaking. This is the only place I have. How will I eat? Please, sir, have mercy on me. Naomi, he said, still avoiding her teary eyes, I've already made up my mind. You can't stay here anymore. Just pack your things. Naomi felt like her entire world was crashing down around her. She looked around the tiny shop where she had spent the last 2 years. It wasn't much, just faded walls and the hum of an old iron, but it had been her safe home. She had no family, no friends, and not a single coin to her name. That evening, with nothing but a small worn bag of her few clothes slung over her shoulder, Naomi walked aimlessly through the darkening streets. The sun had set, painting the sky in deep oranges, and the town was quiet except for the occasional rumble of cars passing by like distant thunder. She felt invisible, like the world had forgotten she even existed, her footsteps echoing her loneliness. As she wandered, her eyes caught an uncompleted building ahead. The walls were high and rough, but there were no doors or windows yet, leaving it open to the night. She peeped inside cautiously and saw a flat surface of stacked cement blocks. It wasn't safe with its shadows and drafts, but it was better than sleeping exposed on the street. Naomi climbed inside carefully, laid her bag on the cold, gritty floor and sat down, hugging her knees. God, please help me, she whispered into the emptiness, her voice small. She lay on the floor then, using her thin wrapper as a makeshift blanket. The night was long and bitterly cold, the wind whistling through gaps, but she stayed awake, her mind swirling with terrifying thoughts of what tomorrow would bring. What if no one ever helped her again? The next morning, the sound of voices, rough and lively, woke Naomi with a start. She sat up quickly, startled, her heart racing as a group of men walked into the building, holding tools like hammers and trowels, wearing yellow helmets that gleamed in the sunlight. They stopped in their tracks when they saw her huddled there. Who are you and what are you doing here? One of the men asked, his tone firm but not unkind, his brow furrowed in surprise. Naomi stood up shakily, her hands trembling at her sides. Please, sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to trespass. I lost my job yesterday and I'm hoping to have the opportunity to work here. Please, I can work. Let me help with the construction. I'll do anything. The men exchanged glances, some shaking their heads slowly. This is not a job for women, one of them said gruffly. It's hard work, lifting heavy blocks, mixing cement. Are you sure you can handle it? I can do it, sir, Naomi said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. I'm strong. Please just give me a chance. The men hesitated, whispering among themselves in low tones. Finally, one nodded. You have to talk to the boss, he'll be here soon. Naomi nodded gratefully. Thank you, sir. I'll wait. She sat quietly in a corner of the building, watching as the workers began their tasks, the sharp clang of hammers echoing, the dusty smell of fresh cement filling the air. For the first time in days, Naomi felt a small flicker of hope warming her chest. But would the boss see her the same way? After about an hour, a tall man in a crisp white shirt and sturdy safety boots walked into the building, his face strict and no-nonsense, like someone who ran a tight ship. The workers quickly gathered around him, explaining Naomi's situation in hushed voices. The man walked up to her, his eyes scanning her from head to toe, assessing. So, you want to work here? He asked, his voice deep and commanding. Yes, sir, Naomi said, standing straight despite her nerves. I have no place to go and I need to survive. I will do my best. The man raised an eyebrow skeptically. This is not a place for playing around. If you cannot handle it, you will leave, do you understand? Yes, sir, I understand, she replied firmly. All right, he said after a long, tense pause, you can start tomorrow. Naomi's face lit up with pure joy, tears pricking her eyes. Thank you, sir. God bless you, sir. As the workers returned to their tasks, the air buzzing with activity, Naomi sat in the corner, tears streaming down her face, this time not from sadness, but from a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, things were turning. But how long would this fragile chance last? The next morning, Naomi started her first day on the site under the blazing sun. The heat was relentless, baking the ground, and the work was harder than she had ever imagined, her shoulders aching from the load. She carried heavy cement blocks balanced on her head, the rough edges digging in, mixed thick cement with sand until her arms burned, and fetched buckets of water from a nearby tap, sloshing over her feet. Her arms ached deeply and her legs felt weak and wobbly, but she didn't stop, pushing through the sweat stinging her eyes. The workers watched her with growing surprise. Ah, this girl is really strong, one of them said, wiping his brow. Another laughed in admiration. Honestly, she's even working better than some of the boys here. Naomi ignored their comments, focusing on each task. She knew she had no choice. This was her second chance and she couldn't afford to mess it up. But whispers of doubt lingered. Could she keep this up or would the toll be too much? A week later, the owner of the building, Mr. Francis, a well-dressed man with a calm but commanding presence, his suit crisp despite the dust, arrived unexpectedly to inspect the progress. As he walked around the site, his polished shoes crunching on gravel, he noticed something unusual in the corner. A young girl was carrying heavy blocks on her head, her clothes stained gray with cement, sweat dripping down her determined face, but she didn't pause or complain. "Who is that girl?" Mr. Francis asked the engineer, pointing at Naomi with a frown. The engineer hesitated, then replied carefully, "Ah, sir, her name is Naomi. She has been working with us for about a week now." "Why is she doing this kind of work?" "This is not work for a young girl," Mr. Francis said, his voice laced with concern, his brow creasing. The engineer explained how Naomi had nowhere to go and had begged to be allowed to work. "She's very hard-working, sir. She doesn't complain and she gets the job done every time." Mr. Francis shook his head firmly. "This is not right. Call her here." The engineer nodded and waved Naomi over. She quickly wiped her face with the edge of her dress, smearing more dust, and walked to where they were standing, her steps steady. "Good morning, sir," Naomi said, bowing slightly in respect. "Morning," Mr. Francis said, his voice kind but firm. "What's your name?" "Naomi, sir." "Naomi, why are you doing this kind of work? Don't you know it's dangerous and too hard for someone like you?" Naomi lowered her head, her voice soft. "Sir, I have no other choice. I need to survive. Please, sir, don't send me away. I'll do anything to keep this job." Mr. Francis sighed deeply, his eyes softening with pity. "This is not the kind of life a young girl like you should live. You can't continue here. I'll speak to the engineer. You have to stop this work." Naomi's heart sank like lead, a cold wave washing over her. She opened her mouth to speak, to beg again, but no words came out. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at Mr. Francis, hoping desperately he would change his mind. But what drove his sudden compassion, and would it lead to mercy or more loss? The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows over the site, when the engineer called Naomi aside later that evening. His face looked heavy, full of regret, and Naomi's heart sank even before he spoke. "Naomi," he began slowly, "Mr. Francis said you can't continue working here. It's for your own good, you're too young to be carrying this kind of load." Naomi's chest tightened like a vice. "Sir, please? I have nowhere to go. I'll work harder, I promise. I don't even mind sleeping here." The engineer shook his head sadly. "It's not my decision. You have to leave. I'm sorry. You know what they say, every disappointment is a blessing," he added gently. "I believe God will grant you a better opportunity." Tears spilled from Naomi's eyes as she packed her few belongings, a worn wrapper and her bag, her hands shaking. She moved to another uncompleted building nearby, the night air chilling her skin. That night, as she lay on the cold cement floor, rough against her back, Naomi felt more alone than ever. She hugged herself tightly, shivering in the dark. "God, why me?" she whispered, her voice shaking with sobs. "What did I do to deserve this?" But no answer came, only the distant hum of crickets. Meanwhile, what was Mr. Francis thinking? Guilt gnawing at him, or something deeper? Meanwhile, Mr. Francis went to the laundry shop to collect his freshly cleaned clothes that evening. The owner greeted him warmly, the familiar scent of starch and soap in the air. "Good evening, sir." "Welcome." "Good evening," Mr. Francis replied politely as he handed over his receipt. While waiting for his clothes to be bundled, he glanced around the shop, his thoughts drifting back to Naomi, her determined eyes, her quiet plea. Something about her had stayed with him, tugging at his conscience, and he couldn't shake the feeling that she needed real help. "Excuse me," he said to the owner, "do you know a girl named Naomi? She used to work here." The owner's cheerful expression faded instantly, replaced by discomfort. "Naomi? She had a problem with one of our customers. The woman wasn't happy and demanded I sack her. It was your fiancé Chinny that said she must go." Mr. Francis blinked in surprise, his mind reeling. "Chinny? Are you sure?" "Yes, sir," the owner nodded. "She was very upset that Naomi spilled water on her clothes. She even threatened to stop bringing her laundry here if I didn't fire the girl." Francis was quiet for a long moment, processing the words, a knot forming in his stomach. "Do you know where Naomi is now?" The owner shook his head. "No idea, sir. She just left like that. I don't think she had anywhere to go. Francis thanked the owner quietly and collected his clothes, but his mind was troubled, swirling with questions. Why would Chinny go so far as to get a girl fired over something so small? And where was Naomi now, alone and vulnerable? As he drove home that evening, the city lights blurring past, Francis couldn't help but feel a deep sense of guilt weighing on him like a shadow. He knew he had to find Naomi no matter how long it took. But what shocking truth about Chinny would he uncover next? A few days later, Naomi was walking along the dusty roadside, her thin slippers barely protecting her feet from the rough, jagged ground that bit into her soles. She wrapped her arms around herself tightly, hoping to trap some warmth against the evening chill, the wind whispering through her hair. The road was quiet, empty except for the occasional car speeding past with a whoosh. Suddenly, bright headlights lit up the path ahead like a beacon, and a sleek black SUV slowed down beside her, tires crunching gravel. The window rolled down smoothly and a familiar voice called out, "Naomi?" She froze, straining to see through the glare, her pulse quickening. It was Mr. Francis. "Sir?" Naomi's voice was shaky, unsure if she should run or stay, hope and fear twisting inside her. "What are you doing here at this time of night?" Francis asked, his voice full of genuine concern, leaning toward the window. "I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted quietly, staring at the ground, her cheeks flushing. Francis frowned deeply, his heart aching at her words. "Get in the car." Naomi hesitated, twisting her hands. "Sir, I don't want to disturb you." "You're not disturbing me, I can't leave you here like this. Please enter." After a tense moment, Naomi climbed into the car, the leather seat cool against her skin. As they drove, the town lights fading behind, Francis asked her gentle questions about her life. She told him everything, the laundry job and the cruel firing, the uncompleted building and her desperate attempts to survive on construction sites. Francis sighed deeply, gripping the wheel tighter. "You're too young to be going through all this. You'll come to my house, I'll find work for you there." Naomi's eyes widened in disbelief. "Your house?" "But sir, No buts," Francis interrupted kindly. "You need help and I can help. Don't worry." Naomi finally nodded, tears of relief blurring her vision. "Thank you, sir. God bless you." But as the mansion gates loomed ahead, one question hung heavy. How would Chinny react to this unexpected guest? When they arrived at Francis's house, it was already late, the night sky dotted with stars. The mansion was well lit, its large windows glowing warmly, and a neatly trimmed garden bloomed with flowers that perfumed the air. Naomi couldn't believe her eyes as they stepped inside, the marble floors shining, the air cool and fresh. Suddenly, Chinny appeared from the living room, her silk robe flowing, her eyes narrowing sharply when she saw Naomi trailing behind Francis. "Who is this?" Chinny demanded, her tone sharp as a knife. Francis remained calm, his voice steady. "Her name is Naomi. She'll be staying here." "What?" Chinny's voice rose in outrage. "This dirty girl in my house? Are you serious, Francis?" "Yes, I am," he replied firmly. "She needs help and I've decided to help her. That's final." Chinny threw her hands in the air dramatically. "Francis, have you lost your mind? Do you know what people will say if they see her here?" "I don't care what people say," Francis said, his voice steady as rock. "Naomi is staying. She'll work here and have a place to sleep." Chinny glared at Naomi, who stood silently by the door, feeling like an unwelcome intruder in this luxurious world. "This is not your decision alone, Francis." "It is now," Francis said simply. He then showed Naomi to her room. The bed looked soft and inviting, with crisp sheets, and there was even a small window with flowing curtains that let in a gentle breeze. Naomi sat down slowly on the edge, her heart pounding with a mix of gratitude and fear. As she lay down that night, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Chinny's anger had been loud and clear, her eyes like daggers. Naomi knew her troubles might not be over yet. What schemes was Chinny plotting in the shadows? From the moment Naomi started working in the house, Chinny treated her like a pesky intruder, her every glance laced with venom. Every little thing Naomi did seemed to annoy her deeply. "Is this how you sweep? Look at the corner." Chinny snapped one morning, pointing at an already spotless floor, her voice echoing off the walls. "I'm sorry, Ma," Naomi said quietly, grabbing the broom to sweep again, her hands steady despite the sting. "Sorry for yourself," Chinny hissed, walking away with a deep frown, her heels clicking sharply. It wasn't just the harsh words. Chinny made sure Naomi felt unwelcome in every possible way. She refused to let Naomi eat most of the time, saying coldly, "This house is not a free-for-all. If you're hungry, manage whatever you brought from outside." The kitchen smelled of rich meals. Naomi could only watch from afar, her stomach growling in silence. One night, Frances came home earlier than usual, the clock ticking past dinner, and found Naomi sitting by herself in the dim kitchen, staring at an empty plate on the table, her eyes hollow. "Naomi, have you eaten?" he asked, concern creasing his face. Naomi hesitated, then shook her head slowly. "No, sir." "Why not?" "There's food in this house." Naomi lowered her gaze to the floor. "Madam said I shouldn't eat." Frances's eyes darkened with anger, a storm brewing. He stormed into the living room where Chinny was scrolling through her phone lazily, the screen's glow on her face. "Why are you starving her?" he demanded, his voice booming. Chinny didn't even look up. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't pretend," Frances said firmly, towering over her. "Naomi is here to work, not to suffer. Go and serve her food now." Chinny laughed bitterly, rolling her eyes. "You're making this girl too comfortable, Frances. But fine, if that's what you want." Moments later, Chinny placed a bowl of watery soup and a tiny shriveled piece of yam in front of Naomi in the kitchen, the steam barely rising. "Here," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Enjoy." Naomi's hands trembled as she picked up the spoon, the meager meal mocking her hunger. She couldn't stop the tears rolling down her cheeks, hot and silent. "Thank you, Ma," she whispered, her voice breaking. Chinny smiled mockingly and walked away, leaving Naomi to cry quietly into her sparse meal, the salt of her tears mixing with the bland taste. But despite everything, the cruelty, the isolation, Naomi remained kind at heart. She kept doing her chores quietly, avoiding trouble where she could, her gentle spirit unbroken. How much more could she endure before breaking? One day, Frances came back home after a long, exhausting day at work, his shoulders slumped, the weight of meetings heavy on him. The house was unusually quiet, the air still, and Chinny was nowhere to be found, no clatter of her heels or sharp commands. He tried calling her phone, but it rang unanswered into voicemail. Then he remembered. She had told him a few days ago that she had a party to attend, her voice excited about friends and fun. Maybe she's still at the party, Frances thought, shrugging it off as he headed to his room, the soft creak of the door welcoming him. It was very late, almost midnight, when Chinny finally returned home, the loud bang of the front door jolting Naomi awake in her room. Chinny was staggering unsteadily, her makeup smeared across her face like war paint, her clothes wrinkled and reeking of sharp alcohol that filled the hallway. She barely made it a few steps inside before she bent over and started vomiting on the living room floor, the sour smell spreading quickly. Naomi quickly rushed out of her room, her wrapper tied hastily. "Madam, are you okay?" she asked, worried creases on her forehead. Chinny just waved her hand weakly, slurring nothing, and slumped onto the floor without another word, her body limp. Naomi grabbed a mop from the corner and cleaned up the mess efficiently, the wet slosh of the mop steady despite the late hour. Then she helped Chinny to her feet, Chinny leaning heavily on her, breath hot and ragged, and guided her. "Let me take you to bed, madam," Naomi said softly, though it wasn't easy, Chinny's weight pulling at her arms. Naomi finally got her to the bed and noticed something alarming. Chinny's body felt scorching hot to the touch, her skin flushed. "Ah, she has a fever," Naomi whispered to herself, concern deepening. She quickly went to the kitchen, brought back a bowl of cold water that chilled her hands, and began dabbing Chinny's forehead gently with a soft cloth, the water dripping softly. After some time, Chinny stirred and woke up groggily, but instead of gratitude, her eyes flashed with anger. "What are you doing? Why are you touching me?" Chinny shouted, sitting up abruptly. "Madam, you were not feeling well, I was just trying to help you," Naomi explained, still holding the wet cloth, her voice calm. "With your dirty hands? How dare you touch my skin?" Chinny yelled, her face twisting. She grabbed the bowl of water and emptied it right over Naomi's head in a rush, drenching her clothes and hair, the cold shock making Naomi gasp. Naomi stood there shocked, water pooling at her feet, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "I was only trying to help," she said quietly, her voice small. Just then Frances walked into the room, drawn by the noise. He looked at the water on the floor, Naomi standing soaked and shivering, and Chinny yelling wildly. "What is going on here?" Frances asked, frowning deeply. Chinny pointed at Naomi accusingly. "She thinks she can touch me with her filthy hands." Frances turned to Chinny, his voice firm and unyielding. "Do you even hear yourself? You came back home like this, drunk, vomiting everywhere, and instead of thanking her for taking care of you, you're insulting her? How can you be so heartless, Chinny? Chinny tried to say something defensive, her mouth opening, but Francis cut her off sharply. Enough. I don't want to hear anything from you. He walked over to Naomi and gently took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. Come with me, he said softly. He led her to the living room, handed her a soft towel to dry herself, the fabric absorbing the chill, and sat next to her on the couch. Don't let her words hurt you, Francis said kindly, his eyes meeting hers. You have a good heart, Naomi. You didn't deserve that. Naomi wiped her tears with the towel, sniffling. I was only trying to help, sir. I didn't mean to make her angry. Francis looked at her and smiled softly, a warmth in his gaze. You did nothing wrong. You're better than her in so many ways. As they sat there in the quiet room, the clock ticking softly, something warm and unspoken passed between them, a spark of connection. Francis couldn't stop thinking about Naomi's quiet kindness, and Naomi felt truly safe in his presence for the first time. It was a moment neither of them would forget. But could this budding bond survive Chinny's growing rage? Francis had always been a busy man, buried in work from dawn to dusk, so he rarely paid attention to small details at home, the flicker of a light or a quiet sigh. But lately something had changed, like a gentle shift in the air. Every evening when he came home tired, his tie loosened and shoulders heavy, Naomi would meet him at the door with a warm, genuine smile that lit up the entryway. Welcome, sir. How was your day? She would ask gently, her voice like a soft balm. At first, Francis only gave short, distracted answers. It was fine, or busy as usual. But Naomi's sincere interest made him pause, drawing him out. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light through the windows, he admitted more. It was stressful, honestly, too many meetings back to back. Naomi nodded with real understanding, her eyes kind. Sorry, sir. You've been working so hard. Would you like me to make you some tea? Francis blinked, surprised. It was such a simple gesture, the steam from a cup curling invitingly, but it touched him deeply, warming something inside. Yes, please. That would be nice. As Naomi disappeared into the kitchen, the clink of cups faint, Francis couldn't help but think about her. She was always so calm and respectful, even when Chinny was harsh and demanding. Unlike Chinny, who rarely asked about his day or showed any concern beyond her own needs, all she did was demand money to fund her frivolous lifestyle of parties and shopping. But Naomi's quiet kindness stood out like a light in the fog. Over the next few days, Francis started noticing more, how Naomi would quietly tidy up without being told, her broom whispering over the floors, how she greeted everyone with a bright smile that eased the tension, how she seemed to carry a lightness that made the house feel warmer, even with Chinny's constant grumbling and sharp complaints. One evening, as Chinny complained loudly about something unimportant, a delayed delivery or a minor inconvenience, her voice grating like nails on glass, Francis found himself tuning her out completely. His eyes glanced instead at Naomi, who was folding clothes neatly in the corner, her hands graceful and focused. He frowned, realizing he was beginning to compare the two women, their attitudes, their hearts. The realization unsettled him, but it also stirred something deeper. What if this quiet girl was awakening feelings long buried? Francis decided to do something thoughtful, a small gesture to brighten the home. After work, he stopped at an upscale boutique, the air scented with perfumes, and picked out dresses. Some elegant ones for Chinny and a simple yet beautiful one for Naomi. When he got home, bags rustling, he handed them out. Chinny grabbed hers with a frown, peering inside. What's this? She asked, frowning at the bag like it offended her. A little something for you, Francis replied simply, hoping for a smile. Chinny barely looked at the dress before tossing it carelessly on the couch. Thanks, I guess. Naomi, on the other hand, stared at the bag in disbelief, her fingers hovering. For me, sir? Yes, Naomi, open it, Francis encouraged, watching her closely. With trembling hands, Naomi pulled out the simple yet beautiful dress, its fabric soft and flowing in soft blue. Her eyes filled with tears as she clutched it to her chest, the material warm against her skin. Thank you, sir, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Nobody has ever given me a gift before. Francis smiled warmly. You deserve it, Naomi. You've been working so hard. Chinny, who had been watching from the corner with narrowed eyes, suddenly exploded. What is all this nonsense? She yelled, her face flushing red. Why are you buying gifts for her? Are you trying to embarrass me in this house? Francis turned to her calmly. Chinny, it's just a dress. Why are you making it a big deal? Chinny scoffed, crossing her arms. A dress, right? I can see what's going on here. You're beginning to favor her over me, aren't you? Be careful, Francis. Naomi stepped back, clutching the dress tightly. I'm sorry if I caused any problem, Ma, she said softly, her voice apologetic. Keep quiet. Chinny snapped, pointing a finger at Naomi like a weapon. You think you're smart, eh? He's watching you. Francis sighed heavily, rubbing his forehead in frustration. Chinny, stop this drama. Naomi is part of this household and I'll treat her with respect. If you can't handle that, maybe you should rethink your attitude. Chinny stormed off, slamming the door behind her with a bang that echoed. Meanwhile, Naomi stood frozen, tears of joy and confusion streaming down her face. But how far would Chinny's jealousy push her next? The next morning, as Francis left for work, the house grew quiet once more, the engine of his car fading down the drive. Naomi was in the kitchen, the sizzle of oil in a pan, when she heard Chinny's footsteps behind her, heavy and purposeful. She turned around quickly, but before Naomi could say a word, Chinny's angry voice cut through the air like a blade. You think you can just walk in here and take my man away from me? Chinny shouted, her eyes filled with burning fury, veins standing out on her neck. You're nothing but a dirty girl trying to steal what doesn't belong to her. Naomi took a step back, her heart racing like a drum. Madam, shut up. Chinny shouted, stepping closer, her perfume sharp and overpowering. You don't know your place. You think because he bought you a stupid dress you're special? Well, you're not. Before Naomi could respond or defend herself, Chinny stormed into the room where the new dress Francis had bought for Naomi was hanging carefully on a hook, protected like a treasure. With a cruel smile twisting her lips, she grabbed the dress roughly and marched outside to the backyard, the fabric trailing. Naomi followed her, voice shaking with panic. Please, madam, don't. That dress means so much to me. Shut your mouth. Chinny interrupted, holding the dress up high toward the small fire pit where embers from last night's cookout still glowed. This is what happens when you try to take what's mine. Naomi's eyes widened in horror as she watched the flames leap up, consuming the dress in hungry orange licks, the fabric curling black. She couldn't move, rooted in place, tears falling freely down her cheeks. Please don't do this, she pleaded, her voice breaking. But Chinny was relentless, feeding the fire until nothing remained but ash. You'll never be good enough for him. I'll make sure of that, Chinny sneered, her eyes cold. When the dress was completely burned, Chinny turned and walked away triumphantly, leaving Naomi standing there sobbing, the smoke stinging her eyes and heart. Naomi didn't know what to do or where to go. She had nothing left now but her worn spirit. But would Francis discover this cruelty, and what revenge might Chinny plot deeper? A week later, Francis was getting ready to leave for the building site, adjusting his tie in the mirror, when he saw Naomi in the yard, tending to a small patch of flowers with quiet care. He smiled at her and asked warmly, Naomi, would you like to visit the building site today? Some of your old colleagues from the construction site are there. I'm sure they'll be happy to see you again. Naomi's face lit up instantly, a rare spark of joy. She had always been grateful to the workers at the site. They had been kind to her, sharing water or a kind word when she needed it most. Seeing them again would be a great way to show her appreciation, a brief escape from the tension at home. Yes, sir, I'd love to, Naomi replied, her heart racing with excitement. Francis smiled and walked toward the car, waiting patiently for her to come out. Naomi quickly ran inside to get ready, her steps light. She had to look her best for the reunion, smoothing her hair and choosing her least worn dress. But when she finally stepped out, Francis's smile faded, replaced by surprise and concern. He looked at her closely. Naomi, why are you wearing that old dress? Naomi froze, her heart dropping like a stone. She couldn't tell him the truth, not yet, not when Chinny had threatened her so viciously, her warnings echoing in Naomi's mind. I'm saving the new dress for a special occasion, she said quietly, avoiding his gaze, her voice barely steady. Chinny was standing in the corner of the doorway watching them with sharp, predatory eyes, making a small, threatening gesture. If Naomi spoke, she'd regret it forever. Naomi hesitated, torn. She didn't want to disappoint Francis, but she also didn't want to anger Chinny further. She looked back at Chinny, who was glaring daggers. Francis saw the hesitation in Naomi's eyes, the flicker of fear, and raised his voice slightly. Naomi, what is wrong with you? Get in the car, we're leaving now. Naomi stood still, unsure what to do, her mind whirling. Chinny was still watching and Naomi was scared, her palms sweating. But then Francis noticed Chinny standing in the corner, her eyes filled with open hostility, the air thick with tension. He understood in a flash what was going on. the silent battle. Naomi. Francis shouted again, his tone firmer. Get in the car, I said now. With a deep sigh, Naomi walked toward the car. Not wanting to make things worse, she climbed in and sat down, the door clicking shut like a barrier. Let's go, Francis said to the driver. As the car drove off, Naomi looked back at Chinny, who was still staring at them angrily through the window, her fists clenched. Naomi didn't know what was coming next, but she knew one thing for sure. Chinny was not going to stop until she had pushed Naomi out of the picture for good. How deep would her schemes go? One afternoon, Chinny called Naomi to the living room, her voice unusually calm, like a trap waiting to spring. Naomi, come here. Sit down, let's talk, she said in a sweet, almost gentle tone that sent a chill down Naomi's spine. Naomi was surprised. Chinny had never allowed her to sit on the plush couch before, treating it like forbidden territory. She hesitated for a moment, sensing something off, but then walked over and sat down carefully on the edge, her hands folded in her lap. Don't be scared, Chinny said, gesturing for her to relax, a smile playing on her lips. Let's just talk. Naomi sat on the couch, still unsure of what was going on, the cushions soft but uncomfortable under her tension. Chinny's voice softened further as she began to speak, her eyes locking on Naomi's. I know I've been hard on you ever since you came into this house. I've said things I shouldn't have and I've treated you badly. But today I want to make amends. Chinny paused, looking Naomi straight in the eye with feigned sincerity. I want to treat you like my younger sister from now on. Please forgive me for all my past mistakes. Naomi blinked, confused by the sudden shift, but then smiled lightly, hope flickering. Ma, I don't hold any grudges. We're good. Thanks for letting me stay in your home, she said, trying to match Chinny's tone, her voice earnest. For a moment, it seemed like the tension had lifted, the room feeling lighter. Chinny smiled back, and there was a warmth in her eyes that Naomi hadn't seen before, almost too perfect. Can I ask you for a favor? She asked, her voice gentle and coaxing. Anything, Ma, Naomi replied, eager to keep the peace relieved. Chinny smiled wider. I'm not good at cooking. Can you make some noodles for me? Naomi's face lit up. She was happy to do something nice for Chinny, especially since things seemed to be improving. Of course, I'll make it right away. She hurried to the kitchen, the pots clanging softly, and cooked the noodles carefully, steam rising warmly. Bringing a steaming bowl to Chinny, she set it down on the table. Chinny looked pleased as Naomi excused herself and went to her room, thinking everything was finally fine, a fragile truce. But seconds later she heard Chinny's voice shouting from the living room, sharp and piercing. Naomi's heart skipped a beat as she rushed out to see what had happened. Madam, what happened? Naomi asked, her voice trembling with worry. Chinny was standing, her face twisted in anger, the bowl overturned slightly. So, you want to poison me? She yelled, her voice echoing. What did I ever do to you? Naomi's mouth fell open in shock. Madam, I didn't put anything into your food. Please believe me, she said, trying to stay calm, her hands raised. Chinny pointed an accusing finger at Naomi, fake tears streaming down her face. I saw you with my own 2 eyes. You put something in my food. This wicked girl wants to take my life, she cried out dramatically, turning to Francis as he walked into the room, drawn by the commotion. Francis was confused, looking between the 2 women, the air thick with accusation. What's going on here? He asked, his voice tense. Chinny cried louder, pointing at Naomi. Look at her, she's the one. She's trying to poison me, she shouted, practically wailing, her hands clutching her chest. Naomi stepped forward, desperate to explain. Madam, I swear I didn't put anything in your food, I was just trying to help. But Chinny wasn't listening, she continued to shout, her eyes wide with pretended fear. She's lying, Francis. She's poisoned my food. Naomi, desperate to prove her innocence and end the nightmare, couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed the bowl of noodles that Chinny had barely touched and without a second thought, ate a large spoonful right in front of them, the taste bland but reassuring. There, you see, Naomi said, swallowing hard. There's nothing in your food. I didn't poison you. But before she could finish speaking or catch her breath, Naomi felt a sharp, burning pain twist in her stomach like a knife. She doubled over, clutching her belly as the room spun wildly around her, colors blurring. Naomi! Francis shouted, rushing toward her as she fell to her knees, gasping for air. What's happening? Are you okay? Naomi screamed in agony, her vision blurring, tears streaming. I don't know, it hurts, she cried, collapsing further. Chinny stood to the side, watching Naomi in silence, her expression unreadable. Then a wicked smile crept across her face, and she started to laugh softly, almost triumphantly. "I told you, Francis," she said, almost happy, her voice laced with venom. "I saw her with my own eyes, she poisoned the food." Francis was in a full panic, his face pale. He turned to Naomi, who was now lying on the floor, clutching her stomach, her breathing shallow and ragged. "Naomi," he shouted. "Hold on, I'm taking you to the hospital." He scooped her up in his strong arms, her body light and limp, and rushed out of the house, his mind racing with fear. He couldn't believe what was happening. What had Chinny done? Was this all a cruel trick? As the car sped toward the lights of the hospital, the engine roaring, Naomi's whimpers filled the air. The betrayal cut deep, but what poison had Chinny really unleashed? Naomi slowly opened her eyes in the hospital bed, the soft beeping of machines steady like a heartbeat, the sterile smell of antiseptic sharp in her nose. Francis was sitting beside her, holding her hand tightly, his face etched with worry, dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw her awake, his eyes softened with immense relief. "Naomi, you're awake, thank God," he said, his voice shaky with emotion. Naomi tried to smile weakly, but she was still drained, her body heavy. "What happened?" she asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper, throat dry. "You collapsed after eating the noodles," Francis explained gently, squeezing her hand. "But you're okay now, the doctor said you'll be fine. It was some kind of irritant, not fatal but painful." Naomi closed her eyes again, remembering the searing pain and how Chinny had accused her so viciously, the betrayal stinging worse than the ache. She felt tears welling up inside but didn't say anything, just nodded faintly. Francis looked at her with serious eyes, leaning closer. "Naomi, I have to tell you something." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I checked the living room cameras. Chinny did something terrible. She set you up." Naomi looked at him in shock, her breath catching. "What do you mean, sir?" "Chinny, she put something in that food to make it look like you were poisoning her," Francis said, his voice growing harder with each word, anger flashing. "I saw it all on the footage. She's the one who did this." Naomi stared at him, stunned, the room spinning again, not from pain but revelation. "But why? What did I do to deserve this?" Francis looked down, his heart heavy with regret. "I don't know, but I will make sure she pays for what she did." With that, he stood up, determination hardening his features, and left the room, his footsteps echoing down the hall. His mind was set on confronting Chinny, but what dark secrets would spill out in the storm? When he got home, the house felt colder, the silence oppressive. Francis didn't hold back. He walked straight into the living room where Chinny was seated on the couch, flipping through a magazine casually. "Pack your things and leave my house," Francis said, his voice like ice. "What's going on?" Chinny asked, sitting up, feigning innocence. "Don't pretend you don't know," Francis replied, his eyes blazing. "There's a camera in this living room and I've seen everything. If I call the police, you'll be in big trouble, so just leave." With that, Francis turned and walked away, leaving Chinny standing there trembling, her face paling as the truth hit her. She knew there was no way out now, exposed and cornered. Ashamed and defeated, she quietly gathered her things, suitcases thumping, and left, her head hanging low, the door clicking shut behind her like the end of an era. But for Naomi, was this freedom, or the beginning of something even more unexpected? Days passed, and Naomi slowly regained her strength, the hospital's white walls giving way to the familiar mansion. She was back in the house, resting in the cozy room that Francis had prepared for her, sunlight filtering through curtains. Francis came to her one afternoon, sitting by her side on the bed with a gentle smile on his face, the air soft with quiet care. "Naomi," he said gently, taking her hand, "I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you. You didn't deserve any of this, you're a good person and I want to make things right." Naomi looked at him, still not fully understanding the depth of his kindness, her eyes wide. "I'm just glad I'm okay," she replied softly, her voice gaining strength. "You are more than okay," Francis continued, his tone warm. "I've been thinking a lot about your future. You told me you wanted to go back to school, right?" Naomi nodded slowly, unsure of where he was going with this, a flicker of old dreams stirring. Francis smiled, his eyes shining with kindness. "I've already spoken to the right people and I've made sure you're enrolled again. I'll help you with the fees, whatever you need I'll be here to support you. This is your chance to chase your dreams." Naomi's eyes widened in pure astonishment. "You're serious?" "Of course I am," he said, his voice firm but warm like a promise. "You deserve every opportunity, Naomi. I believe in you." Tears filled Naomi's eyes as she looked at him, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude, her chest tight. "Thank you, sir. You don't know how much this means to me." "You don't have to thank me," Francis said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You're family now, and family takes care of each other." Naomi smiled, feeling a warmth she had never felt before, spreading through her like sunlight. For the first time in a long time she felt like she had a real chance at a future where she could finally be free of fear and doubt. And with Francis by her side, Naomi knew she could do anything. She wasn't alone anymore. But what would their bond evolve into next? One evening, as the sun set in hues of pink and gold, Francis sat in the living room, lost in thought, the quiet hum of the house around him. Naomi walked in to ask if he needed anything. Her simple smile and gentle voice always had a way of calming the chaos in his mind. "Naomi," he said, looking up at her with intensity. "Yes, sir," she replied, standing respectfully, her hands clasped in front of her. "Come and sit," Francis said, patting the seat beside him invitingly. Naomi hesitated, and used to such familiarity, but eventually sat down, the cushion soft. For a moment he didn't say anything, just looking at her with soft eyes. Then he spoke, his voice soft but firm. "Naomi, you've been through so much, yet you're always kind. You never complain. Your humility, your strength, it amazes me." Naomi blinked, surprised, her cheeks warming. "Sir, I'm just doing my best." "No, it's more than that," Francis said, his eyes meeting hers deeply. "You've changed my life in ways I didn't expect. And I think I've fallen in love with you." Naomi's eyes widened, her breath catching. She was speechless, the words hanging like magic. "I know it's sudden," Francis continued, his hand reaching for hers, "but my heart has never been this sure about anything." "Sir," Naomi started, her voice trembling, "you're a big man." "Don't say that," Francis interrupted gently, his thumb brushing her hand. "It's not about where you're coming from, it's about who you are. And you, Naomi, are extraordinary." Naomi looked down, her heart racing wildly, emotions swirling. She didn't know what to say, the world tilting. "Take your time," Francis said softly, "but I just wanted you to know how I feel." But in the quiet that followed, one question lingered. Could love bloom from such unlikely ashes? A few months later, the air hummed with possibility. Francis called Naomi into the living room. This time he wasn't sitting. He was standing tall, dressed neatly in a sharp suit, holding a small velvet box in his hand that caught the light. "Naomi," he began as she walked in, her heart pounding like thunder. "I've made up my mind. I want you to be my wife." Naomi gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Sir, are you sure?" Francis smiled, opening the box to reveal a sparkling ring. "I've never been more sure about anything in my life. You're everything I've been looking for." Tears filled Naomi's eyes as she looked at him, joy and disbelief mixing. "But I don't know how to be a wife. I don't know how to live like you." "We'll learn together," Francis said, taking her hands in his, warm and steady. "All I need is you by my side." Naomi nodded slowly, her heart overwhelmed with joy. "Yes, sir, I'll marry you." Francis laughed happily, pulling her into a tight hug, her head against his chest. "No more, sir. Call me Francis." Their wedding was small but beautiful, held in a garden blooming with flowers. Close friends and family gathered under a canopy of lights. Naomi wore a simple white dress that flowed like a dream, and Francis couldn't take his eyes off her, his gaze full of love. As they exchanged vows, the words soft and true, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. It was a story of hope, love and redemption unfolding before them. Naomi's life changed forever, from a homeless girl wandering cold streets to the cherished wife of a kind, wealthy man. Her journey was proof that kindness and perseverance could lead to the most unexpected blessings. Francis kept his promise to support Naomi's dreams. She went back to school, her books a new world, and later started a foundation to help young girls in need, just like her former self. This story teaches us that life can take unexpected turns, twisting like a hidden path, and no matter how tough things get, kindness, humility, and perseverance will always shine through. It reminds us never to judge people by their situation or appearance, but by the goodness of their hearts. True love isn't about wealth, status, or looks. It's about seeing the beauty in someone's soul and standing by them no matter what. To my amazing audience, what did you learn from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed the drama, the twists, and the heart, please give it a thumbs up to let me know. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss the next interesting upload. More tales of betrayal, love, and triumph. Thank you so much for watching and see you in my next story.